Boker Tov, everybody. This is Avi Abelo in the eternal and undivided capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem, in our eternal and ancestral homeland. And I am sitting here today with political consultant and advisor.
You know, you can call
to the defense minister. What's your official title again to the defense minister?
Again, I'm still, with Haimina Chadash, with the party. I know people like to have actual titles and whatever. I like to keep it more.
This is just Jeremy Saltan.
There you go.
Jeremy. We're going to call you JJ.
Just Jeremy.
Just Jeremy. It just happens to be an advisor to the Yamina Chadash party of factions stuff, which we'll get into.
Sure.
And, and therefore connected to Defense Minister Naftali Bennett. So we had this planned even before this whole Washington trip, deal of this century announcement today was even in the works. But let's start off with it, since that's the headline news right now. And then we'll go into the politics and the elections. You know what? Let's start with both. What impact, right? Because you were involved in both past elections. Now we're in our third election in 1 year. Up until now, it's been the whole anti-Bibi campaign. And one thing that I've told people is one of the biggest things beside the actual deal itself and its implication is all of a sudden we're now going to have a real election based on an issue. Whereas until now, the left, the Gantz Blue and White Party was all anti-Bibi, anti-Bibi, anti-Bibi. What is your insight now into moving forward with the elections?
I mean, really, the best part of this decision to release the plan today, besides the fact that it's been 3.5 years and we've all been waiting for this for a long time, is that, like you said, we're actually going to have an election about something. I mean, I voiced this opinion even publicly, during the first election, that I thought it made sense for the American administration to release already then the plan of the century, as they like to call it, because I felt Israelis had a right to know. I thought that if Israelis could hear what that plan was, they could hear what their representatives think should be done about that, there would be an actual good policy debate. And instead of all this stuff of yes, Bibi, no Bibi, indictment, immunity, all this back and forth over a lot of stuff that really just doesn't matter to the average Israeli, right? If you're living in Judea and Samaria, this stuff matters. This is, life and death issue for you. If you are a regular Israeli on the street who wants to hear, about economic issues or other domestic issues, we're in a third campaign where up until today, all we've been talking about is stuff that does not matter to them. And people are wondering why it looked like we were going to have a very low turnout. Already some of the polls that I've seen already from this week, some of the snap polls show that we're going to have a higher turnout suddenly. Imagine why. Because, again, we have a topic. And I think really the Americans learned from that. And I think it's going to be interesting because Gantz, flip-flopped on this. Netanyahu really stepped back and he allowed the Americans to really do what it is that they thought made sense. But Lieberman was a person who came out very strong against this.
Right.
And he came out against this, and this is just very interesting, because to come out against the timing, before we get into the content and the structure and the timeline of what's going to be, the timing of the announcement, I thought was extraordinary. First of all, that showed that as a person who is a former defense minister and foreign minister, who this is supposed to be his bread and butter issues, he doesn't want the campaign to go there.
Right. He likes it being on the anti-Bibi, anti-religious ticket that he's built for himself, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, again, the domestic issues that he's talking about are religion and state. No one's going to be talking about that for the next 34 days until the election. But beyond that, like you said, this whole thing, yes, Bibi, no Bibi, I'm right-wing, but I don't like Bibi or whatever. Now people are going to be asking him, Lieberman,
what do you stand?
Hey, where do you stand on this plan? And he doesn't want that. And they're going to be saying, well, you were defense minister during a lot of the time where they formulated this plan. How did you contribute to it? What stuff did you say behind the scenes to Jason, to David, to Jared, to other members of the team there? Where did you weigh in here? Are we going to suddenly see various leaks of stuff that he told the Americans? That could be interesting to follow. But let's also look at the three different timing periods that we could have had. One was to wait till after there's a government after there's an election, after everything. And that's what the Americans intended to do.
Right.
Until they came up into the situation where they are right now, where they're less than a week before the Iowa caucuses and really the beginning of the 2020 election season in America.
I didn't even think of that in terms of the American politics.
Yes.
A week before the Iowa caucuses.
Their time ran out here. They gave 2 full cycles. In the third cycle, they were like, we need to get this out before we get into this primary situation, which of course is not an issue on the Republican side, it's on the Democrat side. But once you get into the Iowa caucuses, you're full out blown election season. You want to do something before, you have to announce it before Iowa. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's where we are, less than a week before the Iowa caucuses. Now, that was one option. Another option was what they're doing now, which is to allow the Israeli people to talk about it. And then there was what Lieberman wanted. And this was the thing that was interesting to me. Because if I was his political strategist, I would not have advised him to say what he said. Because, again, the easiest thing for him to say is wait till after there's a government. Right. Because if you wait till after there's a government, first of all, because we know the American reality, it's redundant. It's not going to happen and you get out of it. But he chose a very interesting option, which is the middle option. What he wanted, and this is something that I did hear from a lot of people also on the left in the first couple rounds, he wanted it to come out in the time that was after the election, but before the formation of the government, which is pretty much the most interference that you can do. If people are saying this is an election interference, it's ridiculous. It's coming out with enough time for everyone to read it, whether it's the politicians, whether it's the public. Everyone's going to come up with really thorough policy positions on this, whether it's the public, the parties. People have time to organize. That's not interference. Right. Interference is, vote tampering and stuff like that. What interference is waiting till, the 5 million or 6 million Israelis vote, then dropping the plan and knowing there's only 120 people who can actually do something about it, and now they're being pressured from every which way in terms of what's going to happen. So I personally think it's really good that they didn't go in that situation. I think it's very interesting that was Lieberman's preference. He wanted to have that be a situation where all of the parties are squeezed after the election. So now he's going to be a person who I think is going to be the biggest loser. Now, people want to talk winners and losers. He's the biggest loser of this overall thing, especially since Benny Gantz, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, did spend time in the White House yesterday. Lieberman is completely out, and he will be completely out for the next 34 days.
You think it'll have an impact on the voting for First Party?
I think there's a possibility, and you're hearing this here first from me, there's a possibility he does not pass the threshold. It is it is that drastic when it comes to him, because you have to look at what his voter base is. Okay, and a lot of those people were the 3 mandates that he got between the first and second election, in which those are people that care about religion and state. But those are people that already the first time didn't vote for him. They're not people that have a strong commitment to him. He got 5 seats in the first round, and he had 6 seats in the 2015 election. So it's been a while since people have not viewed him as a top dog. And he was able to get a few people from doing a pivot when the election campaign made sense. Election campaign went somewhere else, those voters are going to fizzle away. Now, he has 5 seats, right? Well, as I said, he had 6 seats in the last election. He's slowly losing ground. When he takes positions after people are going to remind him that he was against the timing of the plan, he was against giving the actual voters the chance to read this, he's going to look very bad. The position he's going to take on this, whatever he does, it's going to be a bad position. If he comes out in favor of this plan, they're going to say, well, what's the difference between you and Bibi? And then again, he's going to talk about, well, Bibi, indictment, this, whatever. Everyone's going to be like, but I don't care about that. I want to know what's going to happen with the plan. If you're telling me that there's no difference between you and Bibi on this plan, there's no added value to vote for you. And he's going to say, well, what about religion and state? And people are going to be like, we're past that. We did that already. And if he goes in and he says he's against the plan, all of his right-wing voters
for sure. He can't do that.
Are going to say, okay, goodbye.
Right.
Nice knowing you. So again, he's in a situation where the best thing he can do is say something that doesn't really mean anything, and to just really lay low and hope that he maintains the great majority of the voters that he can, and run ads based on the issues that are important to him, but this is a losing battle.
And it's very interesting because you could say he really helped drive the agenda for the election campaign, the past election, if not the past two, and now he's going to have to be running catch-up. He's not driving it anymore. Now he's running from behind.
It's not even catch-up. His voice here is irrelevant. If we're looking at an election where we expect there to be 8 parties that are going to make the next Knesset, people want to know what Likud has to say. They want to know what Blue and White has to say. Yamina is a very interesting, question of how they're going to respond to this. And another thing is this new merger of Labor, Meretz, Gesher. You have a lot of different views that are in that party. They were, again, a party that preferred to go on the domestic ticket. It's going to be very difficult for them here. Are they going to be able to come up with a full-out stop opposition to this plan? What does that mean where traditionally you have a collection of parties that really support the Americans and all peace initiatives that are going to come out against a peace plan? Like, there'll be a lot of interest in terms of those 4 parties. In terms of ultra-Orthodox parties, no one really cares. The Arabs are expected to,
same,
just
Haredim, Arabs, around the same seats.
And when it comes to Lieberman, people are going to want to know what Lieberman has to say. But unlike the other parties, you expect all 4 to actually take an issue, take a position on the issue. When it comes to Lieberman, they're going to initially ask him. But again, first of all, out of the 5, his answer is now the least interesting. Whereas before he was usually in the top 3 of being the most interesting to answer any question. Now he's down at number 5 of 8. But also then, once they see that he's giving politically correct answers, and remember, no one on his list besides Oded Forer is even interesting in an interview.
Okay.
So there's not even a lot of proxies he can send out and surrogates. He's going to be in a situation where, they're just going to skip him. You have a certain amount of time on TV, on radio, any show you're doing. You're going to have various guests. You're just, if he's already 5th level in terms of priority, and you're not going to get an interesting thing and he's not saying anything interesting, he's just out. And the minute he's out, he's just not there. And then when people are undecided voters and they're trying to figure out what they're doing, he's not even a part of the mix.
So, as someone who understands, even while there is blame to throw around in different directions regarding why we're going into a 3rd election, Lieberman holds a lot of that blame because he, on the one hand, terms himself a right-winger. He could have joined the Bibi's government the first election and had a government. He could have joined the second election and had a government. So he really is a core reason why there is no government. We're going to a 3rd elections. And as someone who, until today, thought that we might go through another stalemate and potentially have to go for another 4th election because similar results, do you think that because of what you just talked about, we're looking at a different scenario now? We're not necessarily going to have another stalemate, specifically because Lieberman's party is going to be much less powerful with less seats?
Right. I mean, what you said is true. Let's remember that Lieberman did not choose either side in the first election, and he chose to have a second election over giving Gantz a second mandate. In the second election, he was the only party that didn't choose a side.
Right.
He could have. The Arabs chose Gantz. Lieberman had to choose between Gantz and Netanyahu. He chose a 3rd election.
Right.
That's just the reality.
Right.
And he indicated that, we might go to a 4th election because he wasn't going to compromise on any of his issues. So yeah, for sure. The only way, really, for us to avoid a 4th election is for Lieberman to fall under the threshold. And what we seem to see here is the one thing that apparently...
But not if he gets 4 seats? That won't change it?
So I'm saying if he gets under 4 seats, then,
for sure it changes.
We're going to have a prime minister. We're going to be able to prevent it. What I'm saying, what we have here is a effort that's being made, what seems to me, right, by Trump with Netanyahu and Gantz's cooperation to shift the entire narrative away from domestic issues to diplomatic national security issues, to make this issue, as we said, about something, a real topic, a referendum, if you will, in terms of how Israel should respond to what's going to be released today. And Lieberman just becomes irrelevant.
Right.
And the minute that happens, Gantz, for him, this is a chance to be able to break through for Netanyahu, this is a chance also to be able to try to get whatever he can from the Lieberman, voters. But really, I think just about everyone, and as someone who talks to diplomats from around the globe, there's this understanding whether people like Lieberman or they don't like Lieberman. The one reason why we might go to a fourth election would be him. Mm-hmm. And for all those people who thought, okay, we'll go to a third election, but Netanyahu will lose to Gideon Sa'ar, we saw that. That was a pipe dream. Gideon Sa'ar got even less than Moshe Feiglin did.
Really? I didn't see those stats.
And we know what a joke Feiglin was considered within the Likud. So again, that was not a serious thing, and this was after Netanyahu failed in 2 attempts to form a coalition.
Right.
Okay, despite that, he's still very strong within the Likud. We talked before about how Gantz's entire strategy was to get to Likud, to dump him. That didn't work. Again, we can go on and on and on here. However you want to look at this, the one thing that you can do that both the right and the left can agree on, that all foreign governments can agree on, is that the biggest obstacle today is Avigdor Lieberman.
Interesting. So now I want to change direction. Leave Lieberman on. Let's talk about Gantz. Let's talk about the implications for him and the Blue and White Party. Because as I see it, and I could be wrong, as I see it, he is walking a tightrope to keep his coalition of blue and white, of different factions that include leftists that talk about another disengagement, Hitnatkut in Judea and Samaria, or Hipardu, trying to whitewash language like leftists like to do, right? Which means destroying communities in Judea and Samaria. That's Yael Gurman of the Yesh Atid faction of blue and white. And on the other hand, you have Moshe Yaalon, Bogi, Yoaz Hendel, who are the right faction, who are really Likudnikim in blue and white. So he's walking a tightrope. On the one hand, if he goes right, and it's so funny, right supporting a peace plan, which we'll get into later, then he might lose his left-wing voters to jump ship to Labor and Meretz. And he loses the Arab Party raising their hands to give him support for the president, for him to even be chosen to make a government. And if he goes left and goes against it, then he loses the right flank of voters and maybe even some of his Chaver Knesset. I have no clue. What is your take on Gantz's situation and what we're going to see? And that's based on what he said already. He said already, I support the plan right after, but only after the elections. So where's that putting him with what we're...
he said a lot of weird things. He said also he supports the plan, but in coordination with Arab states. It's a funny thing he said last week, where he supports the annexation of Jordan Valley with the support of the international community.
And Jordan is totally against it, so that means it's never going to happen.
No. I mean, that's kind of like saying I support the Israel to have their candidacy to be the next General Assembly, chairman, right? Like, let's be real about what's happening in terms of the way that the distribution of power is today. And the fact is that America is the greatest superpower on the planet today. Whether emerging powers like Russia or China or some people in Europe like France, you do have emerging powers, that's great, but any indicator you're looking at, whether it's economic, whether it's military, whatever you want to do, America's there, they're number one, they're going to be there at least for the next decade, if not more than that. Now, they're the strongest. Because they're the strongest, no one can really go ahead and treat them the way the Palestinians have been, I should mention, and get away with it for too long. But it's not a situation today where you can just do whatever you want completely. And because of that, Israel understands that there are people that oppose the positions of both Israelis and Americans within all of the various different international bodies. Iran is a great example that has its own coalition. Israel sitting today with most of the moderate Sunni states, which is, again, the majority of the Arab and Muslim states that we have today. But you're always going to have people who are against you, saying that you're going to do stuff with the international community. I don't remember any vote in the UN that, was 200, zilch. That stuff doesn't happen. So I thought that was a funny way to be like, I'm for something, but it's never going to happen.
But I'm never going to make it happen.
So what we've seen is that he just keeps doing the same thing, meaning he has the overall strategy of saying, I'm for whatever people are asking me about, but that's never going to happen.
Right.
And it's not just about the peace plan. I feel like everything that people ask him in terms of policy, it's just always the same answer. Well, is your economy, is it going to look like Nissenkorn, who's the former head of the Histadrut, big umbrella of all of the state union workers, or is it going to be like some of the more free market people on your list? Are you going to have a diplomatic plan that's going to go, as you mentioned, El German, a former Meretz member that wants to give up land, or are you going to go with Yoaz Hendel or Tzvika Hauser, or you're talking about people who used to be Netanyahu's assistants on his staff. So it's just not really clear what it is that he wants, as you very articulately put. Now, if I'm Gans, what I'm going to do is continue to do the same thing. Meaning, until now it's worked for him. He has, what we should say is true, he has the newest of the parties. He's a rookie in politics. He's been in it now for a little over a year. This is his third election already, but, it's all pretty much condensed. He's never governed yet. He's been in the opposition the entire time that he's been in politics. But he's able to still get over a quarter of the Israeli population to follow him. So he needs to just keep going on that line. Now, how do you do that when you're being asked to take a concrete position on something that comes out? So you do it by doing what he's been doing until now. You just say, I agree with it. It's great in principle. In theory, I love it. It's amazing. About the timing, I'm not sure. I think we need to coordinate. I think I need to discuss this with some people. I'm going to discuss it with my party. I'm going to discuss it with different countries and different allies. So I expect that he's going to do that. That's going to be enough for some people. Again, a lot of times, I had a great conversation with a really big academic professor in the Hebrew University yesterday. And he's like, Jeremy, people are just stupid. He's like,
it's so sad, but people don't think, people aren't stupid, they're just ignorant and don't take this or want to put in the time to actually learn and do the research necessary to understand what's really behind the statements that are made.
So I understand when people are in the ivory tower, they just think people are stupid. I was like, they might be uneducated on political issues. I wouldn't say they're stupid. Again, for him, it's the same thing.
Right.
I understand that. For someone where your entire career is teaching people things and you see the majority of the people do not know things, I'm sure that is very, very frustrating. I don't know how many college professors are watching us now, but I feel bad for you guys. But I'll tell you that a lot of people, they just don't understand. Generally, people have positions on issues. People. And they want to see that the politicians that represent them actually take positions. And when they see this sort of mix, this mishmash, it just really doesn't do a lot for them. And the question really is going to be, is that going to be enough? Because what is the common denominator? What is the blue and white alliance? What's the backbone of it? It's that it's not Bibi.
Right. It's all about taking Bibi down and nothing else. That's the only thing that brings them together.
All he needs to do is just answer questions without answering questions and just giving enough to each side and hope that that's enough. That people will not go ahead and look at the plan and look at his answers and understand that his answers have nothing to do with any future policy that he would actually be doing when it comes to the plan.
I imagine the real challenge, therefore, for Gantz is dependent upon whether, after today's announcement, something will be done or has to be done by Bibi and the government before the elections, or it's only going to be done after the elections. Because it's before the elections, then Gantz has to take a position, and then the elections is based upon that. If it's after the elections, he can continue doing what you're saying.
I think there's a few things you can do, right? Yeah. If I was Bibi's strategist, even though he's been against having formal debates, I think this would be a great issue. Because this is a place where Gantz has no answers. I would go ahead and I would challenge to Gantz on it for one debate, specifically on this issue. And the reason I'm saying this is that, the questions that I would ask him, or the questions you would ask him, no one is going to ask Benny Gantz.
Right.
Okay, he's not going to go to Arut Sheva or to Makor Rishon or even Yisrael Hayom to allow them to ask him the questions that really a majority of Israelis should know. And to be honest, his own voters should know the answers to a lot of these questions.
Right.
It's sad sometimes when I hear people, they're like, yeah, I know that he's BSing, I know that he's fudging, but it's just so important that we get Netanyahu out that it really doesn't matter.
Right.
And I'm kind of like...
Really?
The deal of the century? It's not like the deal of the decade, the deal of the... This is something that's going to... This is going to matter.
Huge impact.
This is going to matter. Not for this year, not for this term. This is going to matter for the entire future of the state of Israel. It's bigger than one person. It's bigger than one party. This is a very big deal. You have the right to know what the people you're voting for think about these things. And I think it's unfortunate that some people are clouded with their judgment. They're blinded by hatred, whatever it is that they're feeling, that they're not willing to go ahead and look at this for what it is. Because this is a very important thing.
That's a great point.
And the left, they want to just go ahead and pretend that it isn't. But this does matter. Unlike other deals, it seems that there will be, if we understand between the lines, there will be here some unilateral moves. Meaning, there's going to be stuff here to actually implement on the ground. What's the aftermath of the Kerry plan in 2014? Nothing. Besides the printer that it was, printed out the plan, that lost a little ink, that was it. There was no impact to that plan. You look at the Taba summit. You look at Camp David with Barak. You look at Annapolis.
All these plans that the Arabs said no.
And of course, they'll say no to this one also. And that's also a great lesson of history.
Right.
They always thought they'd get a better plan.
Right. And they were, until this is the first time they're not.
And then suddenly history shows them you can't always expect a better plan.
Right.
Suddenly, it might turn the tide. At this point, I think they would look back at any of those plans and take it very happily. But that's the problem with the Palestinians, that they've never been happy with what was offered to them. But again, that's a side point.
Right.
What I'm saying here, is an interesting thing that basically, from the Israeli side, there is something to be gained for once. Since we started this process in Madrid, back during Bush Sr.
It's a very good point. Everything was about us giving away.
We can get something.
And never getting anything, right?
So let's get
just
something.
Recognition, right? That was the only thing we got. So let me ask you this. And again, we don't know the details of the plan. I'm not pretending to know the details of the plan. I know maybe you know more than I do, but I know just as much as the next guy. And we could say this following. There are going to be some great things for Israel. There are going to be some painful things that I'm going to scream and yell about. And then the ultimate decision is, considering that this is the friendliest, most supportive government and president in the United States that Israel has ever had, and according to my opinion, ever will have, because he's a maverick who thinks out of the box and acts out of the box in so many ways, that we're going to have to... I already, as a right-winger that's going to be against it, I was going to be saying, yes, this we have to say yes to, because we're never going to get a deal like this again, and still be vocal about we're saying no. And the irony here is, for the first time, we have a peace deal, or whatever you want to call it, where you have the people on the right, or the right-wing camp, and a right-wing government, and a right-wing prime minister, supporting a peace deal. And for the first time, it is the left that always pushed for the peace deals, that never gave Israel anything except recognition. We were always the ones forced to stop building, to destroy communities, to bring in Ki'ilu refugees from 70 years ago that are not really refugees. In any case, and now it's the left that is against this peace plan. So what is your insight in terms of that irony dynamic that's happening around us?
To give you some insight on that, I think it's helpful to bring a good case study for perspective, just to understand also about, the future, what it could hold, what it might not hold, and then I'll take that to the present. I was watching the last debate between Obama and Romney in 2012, and that had to deal with national security. And on the topic of what is the largest national security threat to the United States of America.
Oh my God, yes!
I don't know if you remember
I
this.
do!
So I'm going to tell the viewers
Yes!
right now. Obama, first of all, says Al-Qaeda. That's what he says. But beyond that, he goes at Romney. And he just rides him. He says, Romney, you say that it's Russia. And he's like, right. Russia? Really?
Right.
Russia? He's like, Romney, the 1980s have called. They want their foreign policy back.
That's right.
And he goes ahead and he just rips him a new one on the issue of Russia. And the irony of this is, you're asking, what does each person know about the plan? What does each person know about, what could happen in the future? Here's the president of the United States of America, the most powerful person on the planet, the person who has the best intelligence, right? He's looking at CIA, NSA, FBI, DOD, whatever you want. He has all the information there. He has access to all the academics, whatever you want, okay? And his view is not ISIS. He doesn't see that ISIS is going to be created within a year. He's not thinking Iran, because of course he's about to make a deal with them. He just doesn't want anyone to know about it. But there are two things here. One is he thinks the current threat is going to be the threat that is still there 4 years from now, which is Al-Qaeda, which
right.
within a few months...
You're talking about Obama still,
right. And then the other side of it is that Russia's not breaking through. Russia's not coming back. Russia's irrelevant. Of course, after that, Crimea, Eastern Ukraine, of course, the alleged tampering with, 2016. We see Obama using measures that he didn't use against anybody his entire term when it comes to the end of his presidency, when it comes to Russia. And here he is 4 years before that, looking at someone who, again, is a smart guy, who also has a lot of experience, who just has a different philosophy, and is saying, I think that over the next 4 years, things are going to look different, and Russia really is the one we should be looking at. And yeah, Al-Qaeda, of course, we're talking about, a situation where they're a decade removed from 9/11. That's a very big thing, but this is after they're really not such a big player anymore. So, to bring that case study and perspective of the future of what we're dealing with now. The left have always felt that we always need to accept whatever America gives us.
Right.
And suddenly they're looking at what America's giving us and they're saying, this isn't good. And when I sit down, I ask them, like, what's your deal here? They're like, oh, well, the Palestinians won't take them. I was like, but let's say the Americans are powerful enough. No, they're not. I was like, but let's say they are, okay? Like, get out of that Obama mindset of 2012, okay? Let's say the Americans can impose this plan. And let's say, you disagree, but let's say all of the Arab states are with the United States and Israel on this. And the Palestinians will need to do, they're like, oh, well, it's not fair to the Palestinians. It shows that we don't care about the Palestinians. It's not right. And I'm kind of like, okay. So all these years, you're using demographic threats. You were using security threats. You were using all of these various arguments of, geopolitical threats from inside and out, and our strategic relationship with Americans. I was like, you're telling me that that's all really BS. What it comes down to here is that, unfortunately, you're a group of people that do not see Israel, Jews, this nation state that we have, and maybe it connects, back to the fact of their opposition to this, as a special project. Maybe you guys really are post-Zionists, anti-Zionist, whatever you want to look at it. What we're seeing here is really an unmasking of a lot of these people, where they're going out and they are stumbling. When I'm doing TV interviews now, and I'm doing debates against the leftists, they just don't know what to say, because they know if they even say a little bit of what they really feel, that doesn't resonate with your everyday Israeli anymore. And all of these arguments we've heard from them are completely gone. So they need to decide, are they going to be someone who now tries to see the future not as how they want it to be, not as the current trends continuing, Or can they be a bit more creative? Can they be more imaginative? Can they think of what is right for Israel? What's good for the Jews, as we like to say in slang? Instead of thinking, well, what's good for the Palestinians?
So let me ask you this. If, again, after we hear tonight, right, we hear the plan, with all the good, with all the painful, but when push comes to shove, it answers Israel's security issues. It answers the demographic question marks that are there. Basically, touching off maybe not every single checkbox, but a majority of checkbox that have been the guiding light of what a peaceful future should be, living with what I believe to be an existential, a conflict that's never going to end, because we're always going to have neighbors that want to kill us within us, one way, shape, or form. They're going to continue that way. Will that then help further pull off the mask showing, as you started to say, oh my God, so you leftists only supported the peace deals when it hurt the Jewish people and it hurt the state of Israel and weakened the state of Israel. But finally, when we have a deal that's coming to a somehow reality of peaceful coexistence with those who want to coexist with us, you're against it when it puts us in the strongest position ever we were able to. Will that help even your party, Yamina or Likud, in election campaigns, trying to peel away potential voters that have been on blue and white, or the left, showing, folks, you've been peace activists, but all along you've been pulled by anti-Zionists, and come to us where we're truly interested in a strong Israel and Jewish people to deal with the geopolitical reality and the threat of terror that we're going to continue dealing with.
So again, for that answer, it's a great, way to deal with our, connects to our first question. What's relevant is to explore what the four parties, which are probably going to be, the top four parties, excluding the joint list, what do they have to say about it? Again, here, what Lieberman has to say is irrelevant. We'll start from the left and we'll make our way to the right. Labor merits Gesher. Who are they? Are they the peace camp? Are they this group, like you said, who they're going to be completely unmasked now as anti-Zionists? We're going to find out with their response to this plan. Based on conversations I had with them, they want to put out like another letter of a bunch of security establishment people that pretty much say, Trump might think it's good and these people might think it's good, but the list of the people on this, ad think, based with all of their ranks, that this is not strategically good and this is not whatever. And what usually...
The same generals that supported Oslo, the same generals that supported the expulsion, disengagement from Gaza.
It's the people who got it wrong.
Names. All the time.
All the time. Again, it's always funny because these people are now in their 60s and 70s, right, for the most part. You don't see a lot of recent retirees from the Army on this list. It's also perhaps a generational thing. That's why actually I really liked... there's this initiative of this group called Bitronistim. I don't know if you
that's new, just like last week.
Yes. It's an initiative of actually one of my friends, Anat, her husband, he's one of the people organizing it, where suddenly we're like, wow, that's a lot of major generals that support annexing the Jordan Valley. That's a lot of senior, officials from all of the different areas of the various armed forces of the state of Israel that support this. And it was funny because, I always had these conversations. Should we do these things? Should we not do these things? And a lot of times politicians said, no, sometimes you have stuff that happens grassroots. And the fact that this stuff happened, it sort of, it preempted a lot of the stuff the left wants to do. Now they're trying to see, do they have enough major generals to go against the amount of major generals
who support?
What are the years? What are the gaps? What are the positions? They're doing all these contrasts now. So again, one of the things you try to do as a political party is produce the evidence to support why your position is right. So again, the thought is with the Labor Gesher Meretz Alliance is that they're going to be like, we're against the plan because we're for peace. They need a reason why. They're running out of reasons, as I alluded to in the previous question. And yeah, it could be that they're going to be unmasked here as people are just post-Zionists. Now, again, I'm sure there are people who are in that party who are not that way.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who are.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who are going out who are representing that list right now. And I have some friends in Gesher. This is tearing them apart. Remember, Orly Levy was number 2 on Lieberman's party back when Israel Beitenu was in the right-wing bloc.
Right.
Now she's with Meretz on the same list. Her father's David Levy, a
Likud minister.
Likud icon, So
former.
Right. So this is very hard for a lot of people. But the fact is that the way that campaign is being run, with Amir Peretz at the top, who's of course first of all economically, he's on the border between socialist and communist within his economic views. But beyond that, with his views on the diplomatic side, he's very far to the left, and he's indicated that in every interview. He's just in this situation where the people that he's sending out to represent the party are coming up with these positions that are just ridiculous. And if we take that to Blue and White, so Blue and White has an opportunity here to be like, you can be left-wing and still be a Zionist, and I'm going to assume that is a place where they can pick up some ground. The question, though, here again is, the more they go in that direction, how much are they going to lose in the bloc battle to Likud here? Because what we see here, and Amit Segal, who's a known analyst from Channel 12, has picked up on this and has written about this extensively, that for the first time in a long time, it seems to be that the polls are showing there are people who are thinking between Likud and Blue and White. There are people who are thinking between the blocs. It's going to be very hard, based on a lot of the good stuff that's being offered here, where, again, this is stuff, it's not just the right wing. There's going to be stuff offered if all these media reports and the stuff that we're hearing are correct. And like we said, we're all going to be smarter after we see the plan itself. But regardless, it seems like there's going to be some really good stuff here, stuff we've never seen before, and stuff that's supported by the great majority of Israelis. Not just the right, the entire center. Yeah, the left doesn't agree to a lot of these things, but the entire center agrees to this stuff. And Gantz says that he represents the center.
Right.
What's he going to do when he's coming up with fumbling answers for something that a lot of people want to see implemented now?
Right.
And when it comes to Likud is pretty much in a situation where, I saw Raul Woodliff from Times of Israel. He put out a tweet where you see Trump and Netanyahu sitting on the same sofa. And he was making a joke that it looked, they were looking into each other's eyes, sitting on the sofa together, that it looked like they were about to kiss.
Okay.
That they say, like, the two of them are just so close, it just doesn't seem, whatever's written in the plan, that Netanyahu is going to be able to say no to it. It seems, at least, the impression is that they are fully coordinated and that Trump is not going to release something that Netanyahu is not on board with.
Right. That's
the impression. We'll find out again, but that's the impression. In terms of where Yamina is here, I mean, look, Yamina's red lines are known. No one views that as a secret. When you call your party rightward, it's pretty clear you're going to the right of the Likud. And yeah, it's going to be difficult. What do you do when you have a situation where there are some really bad things here in the plan? Some things that you might not be able to undo. The entire argument of autonomy plus versus state minus, which has been a Bennett Netanyahu debate for many years, is that...
Yeah, just to clarify, so Netanyahu has always said state minus, right? They can be called a state of Palestine, but no army, demilitarized, and so therefore it's a state minus, as opposed to autonomy plus, meaning it's not even recognized, which is Bennett, it's not even recognized as a state demilitarized, which there's nothing that exists in the world like that. Rather, those who want to live peacefully with us have autonomy to run their own lives, with Israel having security, authority in the whole area of Judea and Samaria, in general.
Yeah, more or less. Again, autonomy plus is with the exception of them having an army, military force, with the exception of them having control of their borders. That way you don't have to worry about the refugee problem, and also security in terms of missiles or whatever going in there. With the exclusion of those things, everything else is self-rule.
Right.
And again, you have a lot of models that are like this around the globe.
Right.
State minus, as you mentioned, is not something that you really have.
With the danger that even though it's a minus, later on, people can say, well, it's a state. Let them do whatever they want. Meaning it doesn't matter what we decided now, but it could be in the future.
So, sorry, I'm about to get to that point, but I will say that Andorra might be the only example that is a state minus. But that works because they're a microstate. They're one of the smallest countries around the globe. And also they're in Europe. Their neighbors are Spain and France.
Okay. They don't have our issues, basically.
I'm saying if they tried to create a military, they might have an issue.
Got it.
As a microstate next to Spain and France. Of course, we're in a situation where I think a majority of Israelis understand, even those who do want to see a two-state solution, that the other state is not going to be a very friendly state. Even if it might be initially, you look around this neighborhood, usually things don't stay very good.
Right.
Usually when you also create a new state, it becomes a hotbed for extremism. This stuff is, again, well documented and so on and so forth. But this idea, again, about state minus versus autonomy plus, look, Germany sort of was a state minus after Versailles. That didn't work out so well.
Right. Again, giving perspective, Versailles after World War I, the world neutered Germany, not able to have an army, not able to produce munitions, etc., etc., etc. And then we have World War II. They turned into the most powerful armies in the world, even against international law at the time.
Right. So the thing is, and there's like all these international agreements. It was like it was the joke in the Sinai of the UN being peacekeepers, where the only peacekeeping they did was that both sides agreed not to fire at each other until the UN soldiers got out of the way.
Right. Pre-1967, and so that said, leave, UN leave, and then Egypt sent their forces into Sinai to attack Israel.
It's a bit ridiculous, but the situations like this, you cannot undo a state. And one of the arguments that I might have even used on your show, but if not, I use this often. When Israel was made a state, there were conditions. We've not met all of them. You don't see people trying to undo us as a state. It's not happening. An example of that, when people ask for stuff, we said within 6 months we would present a formal constitution. That's usually a thing that states do.
Interesting.
We've not done that.
So
that's just one example.
Right,
so I'm saying if Israel can get away with it, and we've given a lot of historical examples of some bad ones here. Why do we think that having a state minus with the Palestinians is something that we can expect as a long term, is something that's going to work out? So again, the thing is, it's not about state, not a state. We don't want them to have the military. We don't want them to have control of their borders because of the fear of the refugees, because of the security issues. If you're able to deal with that stuff in an effective way, that's what you want to see. Netanyahu thinks somehow that you can do that in a state minus. In Yamina, we just don't believe that.
Right.
If you have an autonomy plus, you can do the same exact things without the long-term danger that's involved. Again, we don't know what's going to be in the plan.
Right.
We have to see what happens there. And there are a lot of various things that can make you weigh in one particular direction or another. But in terms of generalized terms, you want to put yourself in a position that is not just in the short term what makes sense. You want to put yourself in a situation where long term you know what you're doing. Because if not, you're Obama standing up on the stage, and it doesn't matter how smart you are and how many different arms you have in different pots. If you are going to not think long term and be a captive of the present without thinking creatively about the assumptions that you need to in terms of how the future can be affected, you can find yourself in a bad position. Israel is very good at this, at being someone who thinks outside the box. It's part of our high-tech sector. We're innovative. We're entrepreneurs. We think, what is the next thing? And then we try to create that. We need to make sure that what comes out of this Trump deal is, first of all, whatever we can get right now unilaterally we want to be able to do that. It's possible that there's going to be a price you have to pay for what you're going to get unilaterally. And then again, you have to measure the cost-benefit analysis like any rational situation. But beyond the short term, within the long term, are you going to adopt the plan, not adopt the plan? On the long-term basis, you have to do the same thing of cost and benefit.
Right.
There is, of course, a cost to say no to the United States. To tell you how much you weigh that versus, again, the dangers that could possibly come in terms of Israel's security as a result of a lot of these things, again, you have to actually look at the plan. There are so many parameters here. This isn't a thing where you can even take 20 issues and say, well, based on that, if I read, based on what we're doing on 20 issues, I'll know what's doing. I need to know more of that stuff. I care about what's happening with the water reservoirs, in Judea and Samaria. I care about what's happening with the streaming of the Jordan River. I care about what's happening with the electrical grid. I care about
all the sewage that the villages in Judea and Samaria, the Arab villages, just go into the aquifers, and the green organizations do nothing about, even though they care about environment.
Well, there's a lot of stuff I can talk about in the environment as well. But I'm saying, there are national security issues that are not what you would think are national security issues. Right. And some of them are natural resources, which I was alluding to now. But a lot of them go to other aspects. So we need to see what this thing says. Right. I'm sure it's going to be quite comprehensive. My understanding is that there will be an executive summary that's released besides the main plan. I would hope the executive summary does good justice. But whatever we're looking at, it's possible we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of pages here.
Right.
And one thing I will say about that, if that is what we see,
right,
a much longer plan as opposed to a more, short plan, if it's a very long plan, we'll at least know that these things were thought out.
Right.
And that only happens when you take the Israeli side into account. The Palestinians didn't come to the table. They didn't get their stuff
They boycotted it since 2017.
You look at every Israeli ministry, they have what to tell you in terms of what their concerns are about upgrading the Palestinian status from where they are today. And you need to take that stuff into account. And I have to look back on the previous processes and say the previous presidents did not do that. So, if you have people who are part of the so-called peace camp who are against this peace deal, who are watching and, they're curious or whatever it is, I think that one of the things that they need to take as a lesson of themselves is that they did not take a lot of this stuff into account when they wrote their plans. Their plans were not as comprehensive as this. Mm-hmm. And perhaps if they went ahead, instead of looking at the top 20 things based on what the Palestinians said were important, and they just looked at really the full, 256 things that you should be looking at, perhaps you would find yourself in a situation in which suddenly you'd realize maybe there needs to be some more changes here on the macro level in order to do anything to again, make a situation on the ground that is better for the Palestinians that are living there. And that's the funny thing here, because you talk to people in Meretz, and it's like they're saying, like, we want to make the lives of Palestinians on the ground worse. And that's not the case here. There's a disagreement over how to do that. Going ahead and creating a state that's going to be taken over by Hamas, or worse, over Islamic Jihad, a proxy of Iran, that's not good for the Palestinians living in these villages now. Right. They're going to be begging, forget about some of the plans that we're talking about now, they're going to beg to go back to the status quo. You are condemning them to a situation in which they will be really oppressed.
Right.
And unlike Israel, which gives freedom of movement for a lot of international organizations to go in and provide humanitarian assistance and whatever, good luck dealing with it when you're dealing with a situation like Syria too.
They won't care. Right. So I want to go back to nitty-gritty politics, sure. All right?
I love politics, right? That's why I'm here.
Bibi, from what I understood,
yeah,
Bibi was personally invited by President Trump via Vice President Pence last week. And it was Bibi who asked for Gantz also to be invited to Washington, D.C., that Gantz then orchestrated it, that he had a separate meeting, no photo op together with Bibi and the president. touching upon the election season, was that a smart move, BB, having Gantz added to that trip, or not a smart move? Brilliant or horrible?
No, I mean, all of it was brilliant. First of all, let's start with the fact that Gantz found out that he was invited. He didn't know who had invited him and why. He accepted the invitation and then said it was the Americans who did accept it. He was giving a briefing to journalists, and he was saying how the Americans see him as a true diplomatic whatever. And then Mike Pence goes out there and just matter of hand, mentions that Netanyahu was the one that had done that. So it made Gantz look like a complete idiot to all the people who he had just said that the White House was the one that initiated it. So that was win number one. Win number two was when Gantz indicated that he might not accept the invitation. The Americans sent out a lot of signals that it's not acceptable to say no to the United States of America.
Really?
And beyond that,
that sounds
signals.
That sounds something extreme. Like, you don't usually have to do that.
Usually you don't need to do that.
Wow.
But if you're looking at formal things that were, because there are signals and there are things that are more formal. The more formal responses we saw was that, they indicated, as was said previously by Gantz himself, that he had accepted the invitation. Meanwhile, Gantz had said that he didn't.
Right. And they had to have a meeting Saturday night to decide.
So then he dispatched one of his assistants, and she worked with the White House to sort of deal with what needed to be dealt with in order to sort of climb down the ladder and save face. And this idea was made that he would get a separate meeting, and he would not have to be with Netanyahu in the same frame. And all that stuff worked well for Gantz because he's like, great, I'm going to get some great media coverage with Trump. Of course, after he already flew into Washington, he found out that it was just going to be a photo op, meaning they would have a meeting, but there's going to be a photo, there's going to be no reporters and no video. Oh. And so that was a surprise, of course, to him. Since
I saw publicly that he requested there to be no
really?
Journalist press coverage.
Did
that
he?
I'm almost positive. Again, I saw that.
Well,
that was his request.
Of course, that must be why. Also, the Netanyahu meeting of the same level, right? Because there were two Netanyahu meetings yesterday,
right? And
there was one Gantz. So there was the Netanyahu and Gantz one that were considered equal,
right?
As people who will both potentially be the next prime minister. There was one of sitting with the current prime minister. There was a difference between the two. So the two of that level did not have photo op.
Interesting. No photo op or no press?
No video and no press.
Right, just a photo op.
Just a photo op. And the later ones, so that was more...
The official prime minister president meeting.
So that was separate. I don't think Netanyahu would ever give up on video and press in the White House. So I find it very peculiar. First of all, to think that Gantz would get it and then Netanyahu wouldn't get it, or that's a very interesting narrative. But I mean, this overall impression is, and this is the situation Gantz has been dealing with, is that it's very clear that Trump and Netanyahu are coordinated, and that Gantz is trying to make it look like he's a person who can speak to this White House. He's trying to make it look like he's this guy who's this diplomatic figure, but he's just failing. And Netanyahu's move here made it brilliantly. I think one of the great ways to look at it is the way that they try to portray it in terms of his own media people. Yesterday I was on an interview, and one of his people saying, he's just a common man. He's going with a small entourage of just 10 people. And I just laugh. And he's like, what? I was like, I don't have an entourage of 10 people.
I'm a common person.
I was like, do you have, it's like, oh, he only has, he's like, that's the language he uses, only 10 people in his entourage. And he's like, well, Netanyahu has, his own plane, whatever. It's like, it's a normal thing that prime minister, other nations also have this. The prime minister has his own entourage of officials in official government positions, and they have their own planes. But he has 10 people.
That's how they're spinning it. Right?
It reminds me of the time where he hired actors to dress as security guards in the Knesset and got in trouble for that just because he wanted to have the appearance. So, depending if you're following him, you have this thing going around, right, of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
yes.
how it's different. So for different people, so in one medium, he's showing him talking to people like a common man, and another medium, he's showing the diplomat with his entire entourage and like doing diplomatic stuff as just hilarious. And this goes back to my conversation with the professor, where we're having this conversation and we're trying to understand how the average person doesn't notice that Facebook and Twitter is sending completely different messaging. And with the assumption that people are following both, don't they get that? But again, it comes back to the fact that it doesn't really matter for a lot of people. They will rationalize it. They will justify it. Tov, I don't really like him. I say I like him, but I just hate Bibi. It's the anti-Bibi party. I'm not a leftist. Don't, think I'm going to vote for Amir Peretz with merits now and whatever. But what can I do? And we just hear this from so many people. And one of the things that we can talk about on this, just to tightly, finish this point, a day will come where we are after Prime Minister Netanyahu. And when that time comes, this entire blue and white alliance is going to completely fall apart. And I think that also the careers of a lot of these people is going to completely fall apart. Because these are people that never ran on actual policy issues. These are never people that had a clear-cut position on what needs to be done.
Interesting.
And people are going to ask, okay, Bibi's gone, so why do I need to vote for you now? And I don't think they're going to be able to give good answers.
Well, that's very interesting. All right, we have to finish up. I have one final question. And this actually, I'm going to find out if you agree with this analysis, which actually gives kudos to your party. Not that I don't usually give kudos to your party, but because you mentioned in the beginning that you, or maybe I just interpreted, that you think it was the Americans pushed to announce this deal now before Israeli election because of the American election cycle. My analysis is a little different. My analysis is that, one, this was not planned. Not only not planned by Washington, it was not planned by Bibi. Bibi was not planning on bringing this issue up at all before the elections. Didn't want it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's much precedence for the United States to invite a foreign leader with only like a 5-day notice for an important meeting on something that's not immediate. Correct me if I'm wrong. In any case, my analysis of how this came about is a little different. It's what I call a comedy of errors. And it plays a lot with your party. The comedy of errors started with Yoaz Hendel saying that blue in the Knesset committee that blue and white supports recognition application of sovereignty in the Jordan Valley. To which Ahmad Tibi, the lead anti-Israel activist in the Knesset of the Joint Arab List, said, "You continue saying that, and you won't get into the Knesset, and you're going to remain in the opposition." To which Yael German then posts her thing saying, we don't support that, we support Hitnatkut, right? So, and then Blue and White's in damage control. So what does Blue and White do? Let's send Benny Gantz to the Jordan Valley to say that he supports sovereignty in the Jordan Valley. Now it gets interesting. Now it's your party comes into play, and I think this is the key. Then Bezalel Smotrich, okay? He then tweets a message out to the world aiming at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying, Bibi, Gantz just said he supports sovereignty in Jordan Valley. Let's do it. Let's put it up for a vote. Let's see where he stands. And Bibi caught the bait. And then he went public saying, yeah, let's put it up for a vote next week. To then which led the snowball effect of the public expecting this to happen, it being a public issue. Whoever raised the phone call first, whether it was Netanyahu or someone on Trump's team, but then they talked, they said, all right, let's do it now, and let's get you to Washington right now, and let's get things going. That's my analysis of how this came out. What's your take on that?
First of all, I do like that analysis. I don't think that, a lot of people want to think that everything with Trump is impromptu, but even if that might be his style, his team are filled with very organized people, and I don't think that's their style. And we've seen over the last weeks a lot of indications that we are going to see a release before the election, and we've been talking about this already for about 2 weeks, and this has been in the news. If anything, because that's been in the news, that triggered Yoaz Hendel, which then led to all that other stuff, but I think it was already, again, you got the Iowa caucuses. You know that that's coming up. I think there was a certain window in which the Americans could release the plan, and it was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you're asking me when did the final decision happen, which they said they're going to release the plan or not, I can't tell you when that was. But that was something that was in the news, that it was possible, probable, possibly imminent. And with all that happening, yes. Look, today is Tuesday. Now, if you go back to last week...
it's a different world last week.
It's a completely different week. Now, what's the funny thing is today on Tuesday, Smotrich's proposal to apply sovereignty, because we don't like the word annex, because...
It's because it's not true. We're not annexing. It's ours. Okay. It's applying Israeli law.
So
correct.
So his proposal to apply Israeli sovereignty was supposed to be voted on today.
Really?
It was Tuesday.
I don't know.
Yeah. So we're not talking about Smotrich's proposal, the proposal that Yamina brought forth, which he said created this whole thing. That's not what we're talking about today. The irony of everything that you're saying is that if the White House was cool with greenlighting everything, whatever, had they not intervened here at all, and we weren't dealing with the timing that we are now, today we'd be talking about
that bill.
The bill being voted on today, and possibly today being the historic day, thanks to, my party, that we apply Israeli sovereignty in the Jordan Valley. And perhaps that's something that made Trump say, instead of next week, that he wants to do it this week. Perhaps that was something in which with Netanyahu, he said, I know we talked about doing it at a certain point, but I think this is the right timing for me. I can't tell you, obviously. In 20 years from now, when all that stuff is declassified, I'm happy. Meretz Hashem will both be around to sit here and talk about all that stuff. And
reminisce, remember those days. Yeah.
It'll be really fun, and maybe we'll do that special episode in the Jordan Valley within the official boundaries of the State of Israel that are recognized by the entire international community. Right. Let's think creatively in terms of the next 20 years. Again, it's an interesting analysis. I think you need to take into account what happened before that in the timeline, and you have to take into account how what happened changed the trajectory of this week. Of course, last week as well, but today was supposed to be the vote.
Right. So let me.
Today was supposed to be another thing, though. The Chasinu, right?
Right. We didn't even get to that. We'll leave that for another time. Let all Bibi the legal crusade against Bibi. But here's the other comedy of errors I want to bring up, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Even the Yamina plan for a vote on the sovereignty in the Jordan Valley today that was supposed to be was only possible because of the legal crusade against Bibi that Blue and White pushed to have the Parliament plenum, the Knesset, to convene today to deal with Bibi's legal issues. Without them pushing for that, it would not necessarily have taken place in this timing. Am I off on that?
I mean, it's interesting because that does bring Lieberman back into the conversation. What happened is it's been understood that you don't pass new legislation when you're right before an election. There's never been a law passed in the last 6 weeks before an election. And that's been something everyone has always, dealt with. The decision by Benny Gantz to move forward with the immunity proceedings against Netanyahu was so big because it went against every legal precedent that Bezalel Smotrich said, well, if you're okay convening the Knesset to do stuff, let's convene it to do the Jordan Valley. But he said, we can't do this before finding out if we have a majority.
Who said that?
Smotrich and Yamina, the worst thing you can do is propose a bill
and not have the majority.
And have, look what happened with the camera bill, right? They propose a bill and then they're not able to pass it. They look pretty bad. Right. So we understood from Lieberman that, just like he's stuck in all these bad positions. And again, Lieberman is, a lot of people are giving him a lot of credit, but he's been making a lot of, mistakes. He agreed to these immunity proceedings and gave Gantz the majority there to be able to form them. And then when Smotrich said, let's apply the Jordan Valley, he's in a situation where he's like, well, I say I'm right wing, and Benny Gantz has already said that,
that he supports.
That he supports it. Like, I'm going to be next to Meritz on the political spectrum. So he's like, yeah, I'll vote for it. So once he also came out publicly for it, we had 63 votes. So then you can propose it. But you're right. Had Gantz not broken with tradition and not said that you can convene the Knesset in the last 6 weeks and do this type of stuff, so Yamina would not be able to do the same thing. Right. It's only because he said that you can go to the Knesset that we said that we can go to the Knesset. So the funny thing is that if you view it like that, but by my own model of looking at what's before to see what affects now, so Benny Gantz's decision to go against Netanyahu with immunity has led to today in the White House.
Right. Yeah, that's part of what I was thinking. Jeremy Saltan, awesome. Thank you so much for your insight. Really fabulous. If you're not following Jeremy Saltan yet, what's your website?
KnessetJeremy.com. On Twitter, The Jeremy Man is my Twitter handle.
All right, guys, I love, I'm a big believer that even though politics is ugly, it's an ugly necessity, and the way to move forward in the world is to be involved and knowledgeable, and when possible, active to make a difference, and that's why my voice is active, and I love learning from people who know more knowledgeable, more inside the system that I'm able to learn from. I hope you gained a lot of information today from listening to Jeremy, amazing insight into these real issues that are having a real impact on our lives. So everyone, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for watching. Please share if you found this interesting. And again, signing off from the eternal and undivided capital of Jewish people, Jerusalem, here in our eternal and ancestral homeland. Shalom, shalom.